Yeah, hey guys, Blue Balls 11 here, back with another Shadowverse video. In today's video, I appear to have left my balls behind. Let's get started! So today, we're actually going to be taking a look at, wait for it, spellboost Rune. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk to you about how you can counter this deck. Sound good? Alright, so let's take a look. So the main thing to keep in mind when you're trying to play around this deck is to understand how the deck works. That's how I play ladder, and that's how you should be trying to think of your games on ladder and in Shadowverse in general as well. So, today I'm here to give you 5 tips to look out for when you're playing against spellboost Rune. I feel qualified to give you at least advice on how to counter this deck, so let's get into it. Tip number 1, Runecraft's removal early game is inconsistent. Just as a general thing, spellboost Rune is very reliant on getting the draw into the correct sequence of cards into playing your late game, mid to late game spellboost payoffs. Ideally, the Runecraft player will have a runie or Kuon in hand by turn 2, turn 3, after which they will just start boosting the heck out of that card. But while they're doing so, Runecraft is very vulnerable to aggressive tempo-based board pressure from aggressive decks. Decks like Burn Blood, more aggressive builds of Rally Sword, sometimes Shadow. Anyway, the point is, during those early turns, before the first evolution turn of Runecraft, you want to be putting out as much board pressure as your deck will allow. Say, whether that be Shadowcraft and you play a He Who Once Rocked into 3 tokens into turn 4 Wintergod. That's a tricky board for Runecraft to remove. For decks like Aggressive Evolution Sword and Burnt Blood, it's a bit more straightforward. You just make sure you have those early low-costed followers in hand and you're able to play those onto the board. Of course, there are other decks lingering around the meta, say Control Haven, Zoom Zoom Roach, Earthright Rune, Disco Dragon, Artifact Portal, but Aggressive Evo Sword, Burn Blood are my personal recommendations for decks you take to ladder if you're encountering a lot of spellboost Rune, because those decks have the tools to be able to consistently put out early to mid game aggressive boards that are difficult for the Runecraft player to deal with. Burn Blood is probably the best deck to counter spellboost Rune with. Tip number 2, play around turn 5. So the way spellboost Rune works, or the way the pacing of the deck works, more often than not, on average, they'll be able to pop off either reactively addressing your board or proactively dumping their own hand on board. It will always be the first evolution turn where you'll know what to expect from a Runecraft player. So what I mean by that is, say you're playing against a Runecraft player that's going first. For their turn 5, they may play a Chaos Wielder into Kyoka, or they may play the Chaos Wielder by itself, evolve the Chaos Wielder or Kyoka for that spell boost, and then summon Demon Caller on top. That is the average roll for a turn 5 spell boost deck. Anything less, and you've been given an opening to try and aggressively counter the Runecraft player's board, especially depending on how many spells they've played previously in the match. However, that also may mean they have a lot of spell boost cards in hand that they can't specifically play yet. So the important thing to note on turn 5 is what cost they play those spell boost characters at. See, if they're playing a 2 cost or 3 cost Demon Caller on turn 5 with not many cards in hand, that situation, it's a kind of situation where you want to get more aggressive, where you want to try and dump as much hand on board as you possibly can. There are some situations where you'll be able to read into whether the Runecraft player is doing well or not in spell boosting. One of the biggest red flags is a turn 4 4-mana Chaos Wielder. Definitely those situations, you don't leave the Chaos Wielder alive, you smack that thing into the ground and deny that spell boost. You try and play as much board as possible and hopefully win the game. Let's go into tip number 3. And this is more centralized around the Kuon runie turns, and that is Runecraft has limited damage output. Now, what I mean by that is, Runecraft's damage output is mainly limited by the number of board slots they have. So you take a look at Rune, you take a look at Kuon. Hypothetically, if I was a Runecraft player and I was playing Kuon into Rune, or if I was playing Rune into Kuon, I would be left with no board spaces left. So on that specific turn, that's a maximum damage output of 7 damage. Now, this is important. If you've been able to control the board early mid game, and you haven't taken that much chip damage, you may be able to cheat it out, play more aggressively, ignore the opponent's board, smack their face, and set yourself up for a lethal the next turn. Those situations where the opponent will not be able to have lethal on board are the situations where you want to push more aggressively and ignore whatever board is there, more so if they have Shikigami summon tokens on board. Tying into that, I find that a lot of Runecraft players, instead of hitting face with tokens, will trade those tokens for the spell boosts, because obviously they want to get maximum efficiency from their spell boosts, even if that means sacrificing face damage. Now, as a spell-based Rune player, I can tell you there are situations where that is optimal play and other situations where that isn't. But if you can either bait your opponent or force your opponent into trading those Shikigami summon tokens instead of hitting face with them, that's a battle you've won in that war against spell-based Rune. And now for tip number 4, 9 boosts. This extends into more tracking the total number of spell boosts that the spell boost Rune player has pulled off. 9 is the breakpoint for your opponent to be able to play a Kuon on turn 6. That 9 spell boost breakpoint on turn 6 is important to remember in order to be able to play around whether your opponent has a Kuon or not. The later they play that Kuon, the worse time that a Rune player is going to have. And the worst time that a Rune player has, the more opportunity you have to aggressively pursue damage against their face, aggressively play down board in order to be able to stick it to smack the opponent's face and hopefully win the game. And that leads into my last tip. Tip 5, don't get mad. Honestly, right now, Spellbeast Rune is a vastly overtuned deck. I mean, I play it myself. I'm a filthy Spellbeast Rune player. But I want to tell you guys, very important, don't get mad when you lose to the deck. Now, you will lose to Spellbeast Rune a lot more than you would like with the addition of runie. But the important thing to remember is, as powerful as Spellbeast Rune is, its average power spike and its average power in the metagame is relevant enough to keep it tier 1, sure, but it's not an invincible deck. It's not going to win 100% of games. If it was such a vastly overpowered deck, it would be at tier 0 right now, but it isn't. For as many games as the Runecraft player will steamroll you into oblivion, there are just as many games where that same Runecraft player will totally whiff the early to mid game. Really, it's about keeping a clear head and trying to find those opportunities for yourself in order to maximize your chances. And even if you lose the game, at least you know you did your best to outplay the Spellbeast Rune player. This deck is not the king of the meta you think it is. It is powerful for sure, but try and keep that in mind. Win those 1 or 2 extra games. Anyways, I really hope this video helps you guys. I'm BlueBlade11, and I'll see you on the other side. Peace.